let's do this one more time. All right, bonus round, bonus lecture video here. Well, lots more questions, and I just feel like maybe went into a tad more detail in, I don't know, all of our DQs today, and that's okay. Sometimes we want to take time, smell the roses, and really, you got to marinate the sauce. Okay, I got some questions from Giselle. All right, some style questions. What are the best sources on the internet to find credible information on various subjects? I have an infographic I saved somewhere that creates a pattern scheme for looking at sources and where they fall on the spectrum of objective versus subjective, conservative versus liberal or progressive or whatever. This would be a great resource. I will look for that, and I want to share it with you all. I think you'll find it very interesting. What are some different types of citations and styles? I mean, you've got your in-text citation, like citing your source within the work itself. Your references page at the end, you're sometimes referred to as the bibliography or works cited. All these depend on the style you're going with, MLA Chicago, APA. And then endnotes or footnotes, again, dependent on style. Those can be places where you're putting in additional citations. You're showing your work, in other words. And you're saying, hey, I'm not just making this up out of thin air. I've done some work. I've thought about it. Here we go. Has social media made it easier to sell or advertise to a mass amount of people? Yes, in some ways. The fewer forms of mass communication we had in previous decades, maybe the easier it was for advertisers to feel assured that their message could get out there. But social media has allowed and enabled this process of what we call the nichification of consumer markets, okay? And so now these micro grassroots types of organizations can find their ideal body through social media, whereas maybe they had no lifeline before. Speaking of spreadable media, if one creates a video, how can he or she make their video spread easily? Well, that's the $10,000 question. We talked about how advertisers are out there just caking themselves, fill in the blank, to come up with that formula. Does one have to be a celebrity in order for their video or their quotation or what have you to spread? Let's have a thought here. Celebrity represents a high place of privilege in society. It's social privilege, it's cultural privilege, it's financial privilege, and that allows them even, we could say, political privilege, right? I mean, how many broke politicians do you see staying in office or achieving places, right? Raising funds, right? You see, like, when the politician runs out of campaign funding, they drop. Celebrity does represent a high place of privilege, and that thus dramatically increases their odds over, the regular person, average Joe, from getting the same opportunities. Joe the plumber. Does everyone know who I'm talking about? Joe the plumber. There's an example of literally someone named Joe who was a plumber that kind of got involved in politics in a political moment on the campaign trail, and then he got his little 15 minutes of fame as a result, and he has ridden that all the way into internet pseudo celebrity exhaustion, and then now we use the term Joe the plumber, like people should know what we're talking about. Chris has some questions for us. It appears to me that social media sites are more likely to spread ads for business much cheaper. Why are businesses wasting big money for television ads then? For some, television advertising is a sure thing. It's what they know, or they know their market demographic. And so a couple of local examples come to mind. When I say local, I know we've got students everywhere in this class, all over the country, but in the Oklahoma City metro area, two companies that regularly advertise on TV include Mathis Brothers Furniture, and then also the Fowler Dodge, right? These car companies. Well, these car companies and furniture companies, they know their market. They know what number of people are getting access to their content, to their advertisements. Their marketing still works in this area. And so there's no incentive for them to, jump ship on television. Plenty of people in the metro area, specifically in their market demographics, are partaking. Is participatory culture a product of the social media? Not necessarily, no. Simply the term participatory culture predates social media, as per the Jenkins book, Textual Poachers, from the early 90s. Sound effects. The prop guy dropped that. But social media enhances participatory culture. And that's important to recognize too, though. That participatory culture existed in pockets, and sometimes largely unknown pockets. It wasn't until, the advent and onset of social media and the internet culture that now we all have a voice, and we can all create, much more public displays of our, fandoms or our passions or what have you. Our pop culture book talks about the technology changing, and so does pop culture in society. I feel like we are seeing pop culture become the leader when it comes to cultural changes. Is this a possibility? Absolutely. Absolutely. You're correct there. And here's where I'm going to identify where attention comes from in our culture. So not only does pop culture represent this high place of authority when it comes to cultural change, social influence, it sounds like a course we teach here, that it bugs the former opinion leaders when they feel like they are now ignored in favor of pop culture, especially coming from people that perhaps you never see in your whole life in person, and yet they're influencing our daily decisions and stuff the way that the people more directly in our lives are no longer influencing, right? So you can sense this is a real tension. And it goes back to Jean Baudrillard in that book about simulacrum and simulation. Is these ideas, what we consider real is being challenged and thwarted by simulations of what is real, the hyper-real, something that appears more real than real. So in other words, why wouldn't I go to the IMAX, cinema where my face is melted off, and I have to spend the rest of the day recovering from, not just this sort of the narrative spectacle, but also the draining sound imagery combination. It's more real than real. It's better than anything I'm getting out of my daily life. And so there are those inherent dangers, as you can imagine, to these kinds of seductions. This is why coming up soon in our class, we check out a video about children and iPad usage. And so I think you all will find that quite interesting and insightful, and it leads right into our week 4 discussions. So very exciting stuff there. Good questions. It also makes me think of the tale of the Pied Piper. And if that's the case, so if these pop culture opinion leaders represent the Pied Piper, you know, and like maybe the melodious tune coming from the pipe is I don't know, a celebrity's tweets or some musician's lyrics, right? Some director's film canon, what have you. J.J. Abrams' film lens, or oh, I just brain collapse here. But if that's the case, who or what is represented by the rats in the Pied Piper tale? That's something to think about. Lens flare. Lens flare is what I meant to say. J.J. Abrams' lens flare. Okay. Welcome, Alyssa. Questions from Alyssa. This is exciting stuff. And we're going to tackle a couple before we bid adieu. Name another toy like Barbie that would be considered a pop culture icon toy. Icon? Ooh, does He-Man count as an icon? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? These are definitely icons. The fact that they probably could be recognized globally, and it's one of these continuous iterations where the cycles keep on a-coming. Right, so every new generation is aware of it. Transformers, same concept. Star Wars. Name a toy, follow-up question, that was a fad. One of the first things that come to my mind is Pogs, Furbies. I said Furby like it was Fergie, but Furbies. And if now I'm dating myself, right, based on like a specific decade to these examples. I don't know about this, but hacky sacks kind of were here today, gone tomorrow in this part of the country, but maybe they're still playing with them up in the Northwest. Someone report back to us on that. Question. Actor Will Smith has a son that recently made headlines one day for wearing a dress. Do you believe dresses will become the next genderless fad of clothing? Perhaps like kilts? And so my response would be, I think we're headed towards something closer to a Hunger Games type situation. So follow my logic here, which would talk about popular culture's influence. This would imply you then know what I'm talking about with reference to this series, book series / film series. In the Hunger Games series, you've got extreme deviation between high culture and low culture, represented by the mega cities and rural industrial areas. It's not unlike some areas we see in our own culture, because, you know, all science fiction and post-apocalyptic stuff are drawing from the natural, and that's why it resonates with us. But I really see it as a situation kind of akin to the Hunger Games, because what you will see is a lot more acceptance of this sort of blurred lines of distinction in these highly populated, densely populated, maybe even culturally progressive areas. And then in traditional areas that are more remote, that are more isolated, you will see more strongly conservative norms. And that's not a new thing. So whether, you know, so that's yet another cycle we've experienced time and time again in human history. And yeah. Do you think the internet has made it easier or harder for people and historians to find reliable sources, whether videos or websites and so on? Both. All right, really quick. It is harder for the average person. It's much harder for the average person to find, understand accurate information. It's easier for informed and well-educated citizens. All right, we did it. We made it through. Looking forward to next week's questions and all of your content to come. Thanks.